say one more time. Morning, everyone. Hey, it's great having you guys here at the crossing this morning. And if this is your first time checking us out, again, we say this all the time. We appreciate you making it up the hill and coming and joining us. So I know there's a lot of places you could be on a Sunday morning. And we feel honored and privileged that you came to spend it with us. So, hey, we're in a brand new series. This is the second week. If you missed last week's message, you can go to our app and you can catch it. And you can either listen to it or you can actually watch it. And it kind of sets up this whole series, The Greatest Showman, because we've been talking about how basically, P.T. Barnum, the movie. How many of you seen Greatest Showman, by the way, the movie? All right, so a lot of you. It's kind of a story that's kind of based loosely on the life of P.T. Barnum, the great entertainer, the great showman, so to speak. But this series, what we're going to talk about and what we are talking about is really the greatest wonder-working man who has ever set foot on this planet, and that is the life of Jesus. And so that's what we're talking about. We're going to be talking about his miracles. P.T. Barnum said this, and this is kind of what caused a lot of people to be a little suspect of some of the things that he had on exhibit, and that is he said that there is a sucker born every minute, and that was kind of one of his quotes. And one of the things we talked about last week is that Jesus came because there's a sinner born every minute, and so that is why he came. He came to basically give us an opportunity to have a relationship with the holy and pure God the Father. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about his first miracle. And before we jump into that, I want to kind of go back to kind of reiterate that we're kind of working from this definition from James Merritt, and that is this. A miracle is an act of God that use or exceed the laws of nature to perform humanly impossible feats to reveal God's power or glorify him. Last week we talked about these miracles as we look at them in the days to come, in the weeks to come, was basically Jesus did these miracles to authenticate him, to reveal that he was who he said he was, and finally to bring glory to his Father. So every miracle was to bring glory and to reveal his power. So today we're going to look at the first miracle. So if you have your Bibles, there's some right there in the seats in front of you, or you can go to your smartphone and turn with me to John chapter 2. And we're going to look at the very first one here, John chapter 2, verses 1 through 11. So just follow along with me. The next day, there was a wedding celebration in the village of Cana in Galilee. Now, Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples were also invited to the celebration. The wine supply ran out during the festivities, so Jesus' mother told him, "They have no more wine." "Dear woman, that's not our problem," Jesus replied. "My time has not yet come." But his mother told the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." And standing nearby were 6 stone water jars used for Jewish ceremonial washing. Each could hold 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus told the servants, "Fill the jars with water." And when the jars had been filled, he said, "Now dip some out and take it to the master of ceremonies." So the servants followed his instructions. And when the master of ceremonies tasted the water that was now wine, not knowing where it had come from, though, of course, the servants knew, he called the bridegroom over. "A host always serves the best wine first," he said. "Then when everyone has had a lot to drink, he brings out the less expensive wine. But you have kept the best until now." This miraculous sign at Cana in Galilee was the first time that Jesus revealed his glory, and his disciples believed him. So this was the very first setting of Jesus' miracle. It's a wedding. And it's interesting if you actually look at the Gospels, and the Gospels are really the first 4 books of the New Testament. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, those are considered the 4 Gospels. If you look at all 4 of the Gospels, you'll see that there's about 34 miracles that are being talked about, spread out all over those 4 Gospels. And some of them told the same account. But what's interesting to me is that while Jesus performed at least 34 miracles that we know of, John says in chapter 21, verse 25, that there were probably a lot more. He says this, "Jesus also did many other things. If they were all written down, I suppose the whole world could not contain the books that would be written." Now, in the book of John, John is the one that is kind of known as the beloved. I'm not sure that necessarily means that he was the favorite, but he probably was the favorite because he was the beloved. And one of the interesting things is John only lists he lists 7 miracles. And I find it very interesting that of the 7 miracles, the one he also includes into that list of 7 is this one. And I find that fascinating because this changing water to wine is not found in any other gospel account. You won't find it in Matthew, you won't find it in Mark, you won't find it in Luke. But John talks about 7 miracles, and this is one of them. Now, I find that interesting because when it comes to miracles, at first glance, this one seems pretty insignificant. I mean, if you're going to make this giant leap into the grand stage, if you're going to make this huge first impression, I mean, if you're someone who's working on somebody's public relations and you're marketing them, this is probably not the one you're going to lead with. Because when you think of emergencies, when as far as going emergencies where you really need a miracle, this one would seem to fall way down the list. I mean, turning water to wine. When it comes to making a huge first impression, I'm just not sure this one makes the cut. And I don't understand why John would actually list 7 of them and one of them be this one. I mean, don't get me wrong. I can imagine there would be a lot of times in weddings where there would need to be a miracle. I'm not saying that miracles shouldn't happen at a wedding. Just not this one, you know? I mean, for example, a lot of people plan these outdoor weddings, and I can imagine if you've got an outdoor wedding plan and there is severe weather coming, as a matter of fact, there's a tornado on the ground, it'd be good to say, hey, Jesus, could you clear the weather up for us? Could you bring some calm? Because we put a lot of planning into this, and he could have said, peace, be still, and it would have gotten calm. I could see that. Or maybe someone runs up to Jesus and says, Jesus, oh, you got to help us. You got to help us. The groom who the entire time he's been betrothed with his bride has now contracted leprosy. He can't touch her. He can't walk by her. As a matter of fact, now anytime she approaches him, he has to go, unclean, unclean, and go all the way around. So there's no way that this groom can actually walk down the aisle with his bride, let alone touch her. So if you could just heal him from leprosy, that would be great. Or Jesus, the bride's dad. He died suddenly and unexpectedly last week, and she really, really was looking forward to the day where her daddy could walk her down the aisle. So could you swing by the cemetery on your way to the ceremony and resurrect him from the dead? Because it'd be really cool if he could be here to walk her down the aisle. So don't get me wrong, there are a lot of examples where I can think where you need a miracle at a wedding. But this one, you know, how many of you have gone to circuses growing up? You know, I remember going to the circus. It was, you know, the clowns were great. Their little cars were cute. The balloons and the things, the unicyclists and the jugglers, those were really impressive. I mean, I could not do that. You know, the people walking around on stilts, that was all impressive. But to me, that was kind of the warm-up act. I mean, I wanted to see the people on the trapeze. I wanted to see the high-flying acrobats. I wanted to see the wheel of death. I wanted to see the lion tamers and the tiger tamers and the elephant tamers because I wanted to see something where someone could die. That's what I wanted to see. You know, unless these clowns collide in these small little cars, I don't see death happening. But when you're in a circus, you're wanting to see the big things. And I look at this miracle as this isn't one of the big ones. I mean, Jesus, help. They're out of wine. Could you help? I mean, that's what's happening here. They have no more wine. Now today, you know what we call that today? Hashtag first world problems. Anybody ever heard that phrase, first world problems? That's a hashtag first world problem. You see, the definition of first world problem in Webster's is this. It's usually a minor or trivial problem or annoyance experienced by people in relatively affluent or privileged circumstances, especially as you contrast them with problems of greater social significance facing people in poor and undeveloped parts of the world. Let me give you some examples of first world, hashtag first world problem. You know, I was thirsty, I wanted to get a pop, I was really craving a Coke, but all they had was Pepsi. Ew. Hashtag that's a first world problem. This was the lamest cruise ever. We have been cruising the Caribbean for 14 days and their Wi-Fi really sucks. That hashtag is a first world problem. Or I saw these that came up, Peter Watts. I can't believe I bought a toaster with no bagel setting. Or I just had a cup of tea with soy milk. It was one of the worst decisions I've ever made in my life. Hashtag first world problems. I mean, if that is the worst decision this lady ever makes in her life, or gentleman, it is that they had, wow, that is what you would call a hashtag first world problem. Now, we're very honest here at the Crossing. We talk about how we're a messed up church for messed up people, led by messed up people. I'm going to be honest. We have first world problems even in our office during the week. Because if you know Jenny, Jenny's our very sweet, happy-go-lucky administrative assistant. But see, Jenny, if you ever go down to her office, what you'll see is over there by the Keurig machine, she has what is called Voss water. Do you know what Voss water is? Voss bottled water is that real fancy cylinder-looking water. Anybody drink Voss water? Because I don't want to offend you. Okay, we got a couple. All right, but Voss water. And here's the thing: it looks good, but the staff cannot touch that Voss water. If you touch it and rearrange it in any way, she gets kind of a little bit upset. If you break the seal and actually drink the Voss water, the staff has to drink the generic Kroger or Walmart brand. That's what we have to drink. Or matter of fact, if we don't even have that, we have to drink it out of the tap before we could ever think of her Voss water. That's kind of a hashtag first world problem, but here's the thing. I wanted to test it. And so one day when she was gone, I decided to get some cherry splash, the Crystal Light stuff, you can squirt a little thing. So I grabbed her Voss water, I broke the seal, and I went down there and I squeezed it in there, and she was gone, so I called her on the phone. I'm like, Jenny, you're not going to believe it. It's a miracle. She's like, what? I said, I think Jesus was here. She's like, Jesus, huh? I said, yeah. I was working on my sermon, and I heard this noise, and the building kind of shook a little bit, and I felt this bright light. So I walked down. I even think I heard a whoosh. And when I got down to your Voss water, this is what I found. I found Voss water and a note that said, Jenny, I turn your fine water into wine. It's a lovely Chianti 1977 vintage. Keep up the good work, Jesus. And I was really excited about this, and she says, Jesus, huh? I'm like, yeah, it's a miracle. He turned your Voss water into wine. She goes, miracle, huh? Now, at this moment, I didn't know Jenny very well yet, and she wasn't there where I could not really read her body language, and I'm thinking, I think I just made a big mistake. So I thought I'm going to test her. I'm going to say, okay, Jenny, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being, that's funny, Kenny, and 10 being, I don't like you anymore. What would you say you're feeling right now? And she said a 5. So I, with great haste, made my way to Kroger and bought another 6-pack of Voss water, and I have never touched her Voss water again. And due to her lack of faith, I doubt Jesus will either, to be quite honest. So hashtag first world problems. That's a hashtag first world problem. And in all seriousness, this miracle, when you think of all the miracles that Jesus could have led with, this one just feels like a first world problem. It's just like, what is the deal? Well, here's the deal. And this is what I love about the word, is the word is still very relevant and relatable to us today. This isn't just something that happened thousands of years ago. Because here's the thing. Whether you're going through a hashtag first world problem, or whether you are visiting with us today from a third world country and you're dealing with a hashtag third world problem, the reality is every single one of us have problems. We all have problems. We all face issues. And here's what the problem was here. They were running out of wine. They were running low. They were running out. And today I know that there are people here who are running low. Maybe you've run out. And maybe you're struggling. And so what this miracle does is this miracle kind of gives us kind of the idea of, if you're dealing with a hashtag problem, then how do we respond to that problem? Because in this account, what we see that John took the time to list out of 7 miracles is we see how you approach Jesus when you have a problem. The first thing is you turn to him. When you face a problem, you turn to him. Verse 3, the wine supply ran out during the festivities, so Jesus' mother told him they have no more wine. Now, again, to understand this problem, we cannot view this wedding with the same lens or the same measuring stick that we view our weddings today, because it's very different. Weddings today, they're big events, they're special events, but the weddings today cannot be compared to the weddings in Jesus' cultural time. You see, in today's wedding, the bride is the star. The bride is the one that when she shows up from the very back and the double doors swing open or she comes down the steps, everybody rises, everybody turns. As a matter of fact, everybody is focused on the bride to the point where that's the time I look at the groom and say, if you need to check your zipper, do it now, because everybody's looking there. And so because everybody's looking, everybody's focused on the bride. But back then, that wasn't the case. Back then, it was the groom. The groom was the featured one. And here's another major difference, because I had 2 daughters, and I kind of wish I lived back then. The groom and his family picked up the tab. It would have made a big difference. The groom picked up the tab. But here's another big difference. The couple, as soon as they were married, didn't take off and go on some honeymoon. They actually went back to their house and had an open house for a week, and the entire village or community was invited to tag along. And many of them did. They would just kind of fall in line behind the wedding party and head to their house for an open house. And the host's problem was the wine was gone. And you're thinking, okay, big deal. They ran out of wine. Just go home, right? No. You see, Warren Wiersbe says this, that a shortage of wine at a wedding may not seem like a big deal to us, but it was a big deal then, because then it was expected that the groom would have adequate provisions in not only food, but in drink. It was expected. And it would be extremely embarrassing for him and his family to run out of food or run out of wine. If the supplies had run out at a wedding feast, the family and the young couple who had gotten married would never live down the shame. Now imagine that. The rest of their marriage, the rest of their life, it'd be like, oh, look, there they go. The cheapskates. You're the ones, they're the ones. That's, and you think, well, that's again, it seems like a first world problem. But Leon Morris says this. He says if the neighbor did not provide it, he could be taken to court and sued for not having enough wine. So this wedding feast was not simply a social occasion. There was actually a legal obligation to make sure you provided enough for your community. So it was a big deal. And again, now this wasn't a life or death problem. It seems like all it would do is affect the reviews on Google or Yelp. I mean, that's what it seems like. But the reality is it was a problem. And while it may not have been a life or death emergency, it was an emergency. And this is why this is so important for us not to miss this. Because we don't always face life and death emergencies, but we face emergencies. You know, losing your keys is not the same as losing your life. It's just not the same. But if you lose your keys and you can't find them and it's going to make you late for that job interview, that's an emergency. Or if you can't find your keys and your boss has told you, if you're late one more time, you're done. That's an emergency. Again, it's not life or death, but that's a problem, and that's a crisis. And there are people here today, I know, that as I said earlier, are very close to running out. You are dealing with a problem. You're dealing with an emergency. And for some of you, it's only a matter of time. If you're not in the problem, then you're getting ready to face one. And for some of you, you've maybe come out of one and there's another one coming. You're in a crisis you can't handle. You have a problem that you're dealing with that you cannot seem to solve. The hole that you find yourself in is way too deep for you to climb out of on your own. You are at the wit's end, you're at the end of the rope, whatever you want to call it, you are running on empty. But what this miracle does is a great reminder that our dilemmas is an opportunity for Jesus to deliver. The mess that I find myself in is an opportunity for Jesus to do a miracle. And this is what this story tells us. But in order for him to deliver, we have to follow Mary's lead. And what Mary says is she turns to Jesus. And what you need to know is this is the first and only time it is recorded where Jesus' mother, Mary, actually asks him something, asks of him to do something. And so she turns to him and asks him to help. And then basically what she says is this: do whatever he tells you. You know, that verse right there would be a great verse for the bumper sticker or your mirror or a t-shirt or a coffee mug or a Post-it note or whatever, because that right there will save you from a lot of headaches. Do whatever Jesus tells you. And that's what she does. And that's great advice. And Mary saw a problem, she turned to Jesus. And when we face a problem, whether it's a great problem, small problem, first world problem, third world problem, we need to turn to Jesus. The second thing we see is we need to talk to Jesus about our problems. Mary takes this issue to Jesus because she knows him. She knows him better than anybody really at this time, and she knows he's compassionate. She knows that he cares. And Jesus believe it or not, wants to hear from you. Whatever it is that's scaring you to death right now, whatever it is that's worrying you, whatever it is that's concerning you, he wants to hear from you. 1 Peter 5:7 says this. He tells us to cast all of our worries, all of our anxiety, all of our concerns on him. Why? Because he cares. And I know this from personal experience. And as I've said many times, you're visiting here, you don't get this yet, but the reality is I never preach at people. Because I have a lot of the same struggles and problems and issues that many of you guys face and struggle. But here's one of the things that I've learned, is that one of my biggest challenges, and I believe one of our biggest challenges is, the reason we don't take our problems to Jesus is because we don't think our problems rise to the level of an emergency when you compare them to everybody else's. Because my problem, I feel it. I feel I'm having a hard time, I'm struggling, but really when I look around, why am I going to bother him with this? It's really not an emergency when you compare it to everybody else's. Everybody else's problem, now that rises to a level to emergency, but this is different. And so many of us don't turn to him or talk to him because we don't think our emergency or crisis rises to the level of him being concerned enough to get involved. I mean, he has enough bigger things to worry about. So we go it on our own. And as we try to go it on our own, we just continue to run more and more and more empty. I can remember when Becca was just a few days old. And, I went home because everything was rolling really well. And then I get that call in the middle of the night from Cindy that, hey, you need to get here because they're actually taking Becca to the NICU unit in Winston-Salem. I'm like, what? I mean, she was fine. We were going to pick her up. We were going to take her home tomorrow. She's like, yeah, but she's in NICU right now. You need to go. And the problem is she was jaundiced, and her bilirubin counts were escalating. And they would test her. They would prick her like every 6 or 8 hours. And then we'd wait to see if it went higher and if it went higher. And each time, they'd prick her and get some more blood, and they'd test it. And each time it got higher, and they said if it got to a certain level and if it kept rising, they would have to do a full body blood transfusion. Now, I want to tell you, if it's your baby, if it's your child, if it's your infant, you're like, that is a major problem. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? And so you're worried about it. But what happened is we went into the NICU unit, and when we got there, what we saw was a full, healthy-looking 7-pound baby that had shades on. I mean, she looked like she was just sunning herself with sunglasses on. And when you first see that, you're like, she looks healthy, she looks strong, she's got sunglass type things on, and she's just chilling in the rays. But you look around, and you walk by all of these other beds and these other little small cribs, and what you see is babies that are, pounds. You see babies with tubes and everything all over them, and you see some that are laying in there alone with no parents around, and you see some one day and they're not there the next day. And when you start looking around that room and you're seeing all those babies around that room, it becomes real simple to start saying, you know what? Forget it, God. She's good. Compared to everybody else around here, she's good. And now because I'm starting to feel guilty, all of a sudden, I'm starting to feel bad about going to him with the problem. Because my emergency doesn't seem to rise to the level of that poor family over there. The same thing happened with our daughter, Hannah. A lot of you have been following that journey with us. But, a couple weeks ago, she and I were up at the Tosic Cancer Center up on the 4th floor. And as we're sitting in there, she's got her second toe. It's not even her big toe, but it's her second toe all wrapped up. And she walks in on crutches. And yet in that same waiting room is a gentleman who's missing half of his face. Like his jaw is gone. There's people who have cancer surgery on their noses or gone, or their ears. And there are people there that, are, who knows, maybe stage 4. And so even then, knowing that she had a very rare and a malignant type cancer, I'm looking at her toe and looking at her foot, and we're looking around the room, we're thinking, wow, it seems like everybody else has a bigger problem, a bigger emergency, a bigger crisis. And you start to kind of wonder if you should even bother him with it. I want to tell you, I am glad we did. I am so glad that as soon as we heard the word that what she had was a malignant cancer, that we immediately went to him with it. And I'm so glad not only did we go to him about it, but we invited everybody we knew to go on this journey with us. And so last Monday at exactly 5:12 p.m., after 40 long days and nights, and that's not a figure of speech, it was literally 40 days and nights. We got the call that she was clean. And it's the call we prayed for, and it's the call you all prayed for. And I want to tell you, we give God all the glory. We give God all the credit. And I can say that it was very tempting to feel like everybody else has something worse going on. So why should we bother him? But I'm so grateful we did. And that doesn't mean every time we bother him, his answer is going to always align with ours. Let me just tell you that. But that doesn't mean he's not listening, and that doesn't mean he's not working. But in this case, his answer aligned with the countless number of people who are praying. But let's face it, when you look around, it isn't hard to find someone who doesn't have something going on worse than you. And because of that, we naturally feel like, compared to everyone else, I don't want to bother him with it. I mean, what I got going on is a first world problem compared to everybody else's. But this miracle, this what seems like such an insignificant, inconsequential miracle, should teach us that even if it's as simple as running out of wine, we still need to take our problems to him. Every one of us. Because the first sign that you're about to run out is the exact moment you need to go to him. The third thing we see is trust Jesus to handle your problems. I love it. Mary tells the servants, do whatever he tells you. And when I read this story, it amazes me the trust and obedience that these servants demonstrated. Because here's the thing. There were 6 stone jars used for ceremonial washing. In other words, to cleanse the people as they come, to go in. And so there's these 6 jars, and Jesus tells them to take the water jars, and each could hold 20 to 30 gallons, and then Jesus told the servants to fill the jars with water. Okay, that's easy. I mean, these things are always filled with water. We always see these jars filled with water. Right now, nothing seems out of the ordinary. Nothing doesn't seem natural. Yes, fill them with water. That's good. That's always filled with water. Not a big deal. But when the last jar is filled, now I want you to go and dip some of that water out and take it to the master of ceremonies for a drink. Now all of a sudden, the trust and the obedience has gone to another level. Because they've been asked to take what normally people wash their filthy hands with ceremonially and scoop out a ladle of it and take it to the master of ceremonies and give them a drink. That's weird. That is unheard of. That is not what we do. But what's interesting is, dip some out and take it, and he did, and not knowing, the master says the master of ceremonies not knowing where it come from, probably a good thing. It's not like go, your family just got done bathing, go dip some of that water out of the tub and go give them a drink. You want some water with your meal? Let me go get some out of the tub. It's probably a good thing, but here's the thing, the servants knew. And I can tell you right now, if there were any religious leaders at the wedding, and there was always religious leaders everywhere because they loved to keep score. They loved to follow around, make sure everybody was following the Jewish law, the hundreds of them. And so they were there. But if they would have only known where that wine had come from, they'd have blown their top. They would have stroked out right there. And I'm thinking about them dipping this water dipping the water and going to take a drink. And it kind of reminded me of that story of the little girl, and I've shared it before, so some of you have heard it, but the little girl's mom was sick in bed, and so she wanted to do something really nice for her, and so she says, I'm gonna go make you some tea. And mom's like, oh, that would be great. So she's gone for a really long time, and mom's kind of wondering why she's been gone so long, but sure enough, she shows up, and she actually brings her some tea, and she's like, that's really tasty, that's really good, but what took you so long? And she says, well, Mommy, I couldn't find your tea strainer, so I used the fly swatter. And she could see the look on her mom's eyes. She goes, no, not the brand new one. I used the old one, okay? I used the old one. See, I think that's the kind of expression that these religious leaders would have had if they'd actually known where that water that they're tasting that is now wine had come from. You see, the religious leaders, if they'd have known that, they would have not only terminated those servants, they probably would have spent some time in prison. But I love the trust that these servants displayed in allowing Jesus to handle the problem. And they did exactly what he asked them to do, even though it made absolutely no sense. And here's the question. Let's be honest. How many times has Jesus impressed upon you? You know it is the Spirit of God leaning into you and impressing upon you. How many times has he asked you to do something that was a bit out of your comfort zone? And you didn't do it. Or just seemed completely out of the ordinary, outside the line, out of the box, and you didn't do it. Maybe there's something he's impressing upon you to do right now, to go dip some water and take it to someone. And you can't imagine it. You can't fathom it. And here's the point. There's a good likelihood then, if that's your attitude, you're going to miss the miracle. You're going to miss the blessing. Because what we see here is they did it. They trusted him. And it points out there in this story that the master of ceremonies, they didn't know where it come from, but boy, the servants did. They knew. So what miraculous things are you missing out on this morning simply because you're not willing to do the strange things? What miracles could you or I be missing out because we don't talk to Jesus, we don't turn to Jesus, and we don't trust him? What miracles are you missing? Here's a couple other quick takeaways from this story that should be an encouragement to you. I find it really fascinating that the people who really had the most to gain and was going to be the most embarrassed and ashamed was the bride and the groom. We have no idea in this account that they even had any idea what was going on. It's almost like it was all happening behind the scenes. They had no idea the trouble that was brewing in their lives. Jesus did that miracle without their knowledge as far as we know. The servants knew. The master of ceremony knew it was really good. Mary knew. But we don't know that the bride or the groom does. And this is the reason I think that's important, is Jesus is working in our lives many, many times where he is saving us from a lot of shame and embarrassment, or there are times that he is working miracles in our lives and he is blessing our socks off and we're completely unaware it's happening. He's doing it. He's working, and I wonder how many times we're just going on with life totally clueless of what he's doing for us. And that should be an encouragement to you. The other thing is, and this is important, is this miracle shows us that with Jesus, when Jesus is a part of your entourage, when Jesus is a part of your party, when Jesus is a part of your life, the best always is yet to come. The best is yet to come. When the master of ceremonies tasted the water that was now wine, not knowing where it had come from, here's what he said. Whoa, a host always serves the best wine first. Always. And then when they've all had a lot to drink and they don't really have the same acquiring taste that they did when they first got here, then you bring out the cheap stuff, the bottom shelf stuff, the Boone's Farm stuff. That's when you do it. You don't do it first, or you don't do it last. You do it first. But you have kept the best until now. And with Jesus our Lord and Savior, with Jesus in the equation, we can always be certain that the best is still to come. You know, this last week we lost this region, this community, and really the world, because we never know the impact someone has in their life, but this community lost a servant in Lori Conley. Lori Conley was an incredible servant who loved people. She loved God and loved people, and she was just such the epitome of the kind of Jesus with skin on in this region. But the reason I share that story is because yesterday she actually planned out her own funeral. She planned out her own funeral. And what she wanted to do, and she made it very clear, is I want all the children and all these families that we've been loving and serving, I want them to come, and I want them to come to this celebration of life, and there's going to be inflatables, there's going to be popcorn, there's going to be snow cones, there's going to be funnel cakes, there's going to be fair food, there's going to be all kinds of a carnival-type atmosphere. And I want them to come, and I want them to enjoy this because I want them to know that heaven is real. And what she's really did in planning that, she wanted them to know that the best is yet to come. This is not the end. It's not over. The best is yet to come. And that's exactly what she did. She planned her funeral, and it was a celebration to demonstrate that with Jesus, the best is yet to come. But here's the problem with Satan. He always promises us these enticing things as if, this instant gratification, you only live once, YOLO, so come on, go for it, try it, have it, Every man for himself. And Satan always promises us these things that he cannot deliver and he doesn't intend to deliver. And it's temporary and it's fleeting. And he has these slick first impressions. And whatever sinful pleasures he's doling out are very short-lived. I was thinking about how to illustrate that, and all I could come up with, and this is my twisted third grade mind, is that he's like a daggone blow pop. Have you ever had a blow pop? I mean, the whole time you're licking that blow pop, it's kind of tasty on the outside, but the reality is you're working on that because you want to get to the gum on the inside. And when you get to the gum finally on the inside and you really clean it off that stick because you want all of it, that gum tastes incredible for 12 seconds. And then you don't taste anything. And what do you do with it? You quickly spit it out into the trash. Matter of fact, the gum makes it in the trash faster than the stick does. That's how bad that stuff is. And that is exactly what Satan does to us, is he promises us this tasty, unbelievable, you got to have it. And then 12 seconds later, in the span of glory, and in contrast to all of eternity, for 12 seconds you get some pleasure and then you spit it out. That's what the enemy, that's what Satan does. He promises it's going to be great. You're going to love it. And then for 12 seconds, and then it's gone. But for those of us who know Jesus Christ personally, we may suffer for a little while. Matter of fact, Jesus says, in this world, you will have trouble. But take heart, because I have overcome the world. Romans 8:18, Paul writes, what we suffer now is nothing compared to the glory that he will reveal to us later. So when Jesus is a part of your life, when he's in your entourage, when he's been invited to be at your party, the best is always yet to come. Whatever you're going through right now, it will be better. May not be today, may not be tomorrow, may not be even next year, but the best is yet to come if you invite Jesus into your life. We're going to close a little differently today. We're going to close with communion. And we have tables to the left and right here, and we have tables down front. And I wanted to close this way because I find it very fascinating that Jesus' first miracle was at a wedding, and the whole idea was that the water that was used to ceremonially cleanse you, to make you clean, was turned to wine. And yet we know a few years later, he's in an upper room. And he takes the bread and he says, take this, and when you take this, I want you to remember that this bread represents my body that will be broken for you. And then he takes the cup that is filled with wine. He says, now I want you to take this, and when you take this wine, I want you to remember that this represents my blood that is shed for you. And so when we partake, and we do this every week here at the Crossing, and I know many of us come from different backgrounds where maybe you take it annually or quarterly or once a month, whatever. We do it every week. We offer it every week. When we get a chance to come and take communion, it is our present day moment to reflect and to ceremonially become cleansed from all of our guilt and all of our shame and all the embarrassment. What he did on that cross was him working behind the scenes, outside of our line of vision, to allow you and I to become clean. Not because of what we did, but because of what he did. And so we're just going to have a time where we're just going to invite you to just come up and go to the station that's closest to you, and just to take the bread, which represents his body, and dip it into the cup that represents his blood. The blood that atones, and that is a fancy churchy word, atones, but that basically means allows us to be in the presence at one with God. For us unholy, defiant, disobedient, filthy, sinful, shameful people, that because of his blood, we can stand in the presence of a holy God. Because when God sees me, he doesn't see me, he sees me covered with the blood of Jesus. That's what this means. That's what this represents. So take it reflectively. Take it repentantly. But as we say around here a lot of times, take it, celebrate as well, because of what it means. And so we're just going to invite you, when you feel led, to just get up from your seat and enjoy this meal that's for you. Pray with me. God, thank you so much that we can look at stories, accounts that happened thousands of years ago, and yet still find that they speak to us as if it happened yesterday. That we can take things away from your word, which is living and active, and is breathing, and is relevant to what we're dealing with right now. I know, God, that there are a lot of people who've come in here that are empty. They're running out. And they need you. They need to talk to you. They need to turn to you. They need to trust you. God, I pray that's what the response will be to every single one of us. There's an opportunity for people to come and just to get prayer. God, I pray that they will respond to that so people can pray with them. To take their needs, their concerns, their emergencies, and lift them up, intercede together on their behalf. So God, during this time, I just pray that as we respond knowing that you are here. And I pray this in the name of Jesus, the name above all names, the miracle worker, the greatest wonder-working man who's ever set foot on this planet.